I think we've done it.
Yes.
I'm so excited. We figured it out. I
Yes.
was taking
Good.
Gyro off of this stream. Both of us are writers and editors and authors, but we're not really very savvy with technology. So this is a gift from God.
Well, thank you, Ruth, for joining me in this special event. I'm so happy to be with you and to talk about my new book, Changing Stories Responding to the Refugee Crisis, based on theory and practice.
Yes, congratulations on your new release, Gyro. I know it's always an exciting day when a new book comes out, and you've done this many times before, but it's still just as exciting every single time a book comes out. And for those of you
Yeah.
joining the live stream, many of you probably know Gyro or a little bit about him. But for those of you who do not, I would like to introduce Jairo de Oliveira to you today. Jairo was born in Brazil, but he has spent more than half of his life overseas working with refugees in one context or another. He obtained his bachelor's degree in theology from South American Theological University and his Master of Arts from Columbia International University, currently working on his PhD in intercultural studies as well. Gyro is the author of 13 books and is a contributing author and editor of From Fruit to Harvest. Gyro is currently based in the Middle East with his family, where he is working with refugees from different countries. And Gyro takes great joy in traveling the world, making new friends, and sharing the gospel with people from around the world. So Gyro, thank you for spending part of your release day with us today, talking about your book. And I want to kick off today just by asking what the experience was like writing. I want to actually show you, I have a copy of Changing Stories here right next to me, the print copy. It looks beautiful. It feels wonderful, a nice smooth cover. So congratulations on this release. I wanted to ask you, what was the experience like working on this book? How long did you work on it? And tell us a little bit about what that was like.
It was a fantastic experience, especially because I worked with
Mm.
friends, so I had many friends coming alongside and helping me in the process. And some people that were not friends, they actually became friends along the process. Just like to mention one, Matthew Sorens from World Relief. I asked him if he would write an endorsement for my book. And so he was so friendly. He wrote an endorsement and he started inviting me to conferences and events and things like that. So we started partnering in some refugee initiatives. So it was really it was a really nice walk, walking with friends. I had also Dr. J.D. Pine, who helped me writing the forward of the book, which I recommend everybody to read. Some people skip that
Yeah.
part. Don't skip it. It's a wonderful text. And he was so friendly as well. He's very engaged with the refugee cause. He's a professor in the U.S. in a university in Alabama. It's Sanford University in Alabama. He wrote a book, Strangers Next Door. He was another friend, another person who became a friend along of the way. So I had Ali Mitchell, who was already a friend when I asked him to help me out. He wrote one of the appendix of the book, which is on a cultural sensitive document that we used in Colombia with our friends, so with our refugee friends there. So it was really a nice experience, just discussing ideas with people who are very engaged with refugee work, and then developing relationship with them, developing different just activities and going to events together. It was really a nice experience. It took me about 2 years while I was writing my thesis for my MA at CIU, Columbia International University. So yeah, it was like kind of a long walk, but a very enjoyable walk with all my
Well,
friends.
I noticed you mentioned that you worked side by side with a lot of people on this book, and often writing a book is a very lonely experience because you spend a lot of time just by yourself with your computer. So was this project different from your other projects in that respect, in that you had a lot of interaction with people?
Yes, yes. And the subtitle is based on theory and practice.
Yes.
So I think that kind of points to that because I was doing a lot of research. I was alone some of the time, but I think most of the time I was really engaging people, relating to my refugee
That's right.
friends, asking them questions. Yeah, like some of my research was with people, or most of my research, I would say. I interviewed three groups along the process that was writing the book. I interviewed some of the church members who were doing ministry with refugees in
Hmm.
Colombia. I interviewed the refugees and also interviewed people from a agency who welcomes refugees in the U.S. So a resettlement agency. So I was relating to people along the time, and it was not a lonely experience, I
Right.
would say.
So you actually used a lot of your personal experience, not just to write the book, but I get the sense that you wrote this book because of your personal experience. So could you tell us a little
Yes.
bit about why you decided to write a book about the migration crisis? What brought you to the point?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I would say I have been involved with refugee work for many years now. I started when I was only 17 years old, and I went to South Africa in 1996 to work with refugees from
Mm.
Angola. At that point, they were leaving Angola because of the war, moving to South Africa. And because they speak Portuguese, as I do, it was kind of easier for me to minister to them, to help them out. So it has been my life. I have been involved with refugees for so many years now. And I would say also that was part of my study.
Mm.
So it was a combination of life experience and then when I had an opportunity to do a research for my studies, I had no doubts. You know, I have to do something related to refugees because it's part of my life, and I want to grow, continue to grow in this area, and express ideas and express my thinking about it. So, yeah, it was because of life experience, but also academic studies.
So I love the subtitle of the book. I think the first time I read this book, I don't know if the subtitle had been selected yet. I can't remember. I first read the book a while ago, as you know. But I
Yeah, I changed it.
that's
I
right. I
changed
love
it.
the
So I don't
subtitle
know. I'm not
because
sure.
the subtitle says based on biblical theory and practice. And one thing I appreciate about the book is it's not just someone's ideas. It is actually things that you have seen in practice. And so, thinking about the subtitle based on biblical theory and practice, what can people expect to get from this book as they read it? Does it feel, more like a textbook? Is this, what can they expect when they read the book?
Um, yeah, I would say there are two clear sections in the book. The first, which is more like theory, uh, could be used as a textbook, but it's more like theory and stories of refugees from around the world, and some stories of refugees that I have personally met. Most of them in Columbia, South Carolina, where I was working at the time that I wrote the book. So the reader will find a lot of stories there, challenging stories. So I would say people can expect to be challenged as they read as they read the book. I would say, and I hope that they will feel some pain. To be honest, they will feel the pain of the refugees and the suffering that they have been experiencing. I have cried many times as I was writing this book. Um, but also I think people can expect to be equipped.
Mm.
I provide like a model of ministry that we were working or developing when we were in Colombia with our local church, the Arsenal Hill Presbyterian Church. So we are engaging refugees there. and I tried to express what we are doing as a kind of like a descriptive model so that people would be equipped. I get requests and I hear from people, you know, Gyro, we want to work with refugees, but we don't know from where to start. We don't know what to do. So I wish, you know, I would have access to a kind of a
Mm-hmm.
model that would inspire us and equip us to maybe reproduce some of the ideas and help to start with. So I think the book will provide a challenge, but also will equip people to get engaged with refugees. But I also hope that people will
Mm-hmm.
rejoice. Besides crying and feeling challenged, I hope that they will rejoice with what God is doing around the world among refugees, what God is doing in the lives of the refugees in the United States and across the world. Because definitely God is on the move. God is working in the lives of the refugees, and I hope that people get that sense as they read the
I
book.
really think there is a need for what you mentioned that your book will do, because when you put on your Instagram that the book was coming, I shared that in my stories, and immediately someone who follows me said, I need a book like this. My church and I have been wanting to respond to the refugee crisis, but we don't know where to start. And I said, this is the book for you. So I was excited to see right away it was connecting with its people. So it's so exciting. You mentioned that your book, Changing Stories, you know, the title is Changing Stories, and you do include many stories of actual refugees. Is there any one story in the book that really stands out to you that you would like to share
Mhm.
with us today?
Yes. I think maybe the readers will pick up other stories, but I'd like to highlight the one that stands out to me because I think it was the most difficult one for me to
Mm.
write. And it's a story about, I think everybody who's watching us, they know the story, but just the way that I presented it was kind of a new way to myself, and I hope it will speak in a different way, in a new way to the readers. But it's the story of a Syrian family who are trying to cross the ocean from Turkey to Greece. They're trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea, and they are not able to make it. And Abdullah, the father, lost his wife, Rehana, and his two boys, his two sons, Halib and Alan, Alan Kurdi. He became famous, very famous. He's the boy on the beach. His aunt, um, Tima Kurdi, she wrote a book with this title, The Boy on the Beach. It's the boy on the beach that appeared dead on the shores of the beach, and he was wearing a red T-shirt, and he became a symbol of the refugee crisis because his family didn't make it to Greece. He was trying to get to Canada where he had family, and Abdullah, his father, lost his wife and his two
Mm-hmm.
sons. I did a lot of research to try to provide accurate information about that story. In fact, I became Abdullah and I we became followers of each other on Twitter. So I interacted a little bit with Abdullah, and I read the book that his sister Tima wrote. So it was a really challenging story. I don't know if it's because, you know, I'm a father of two boys, and um, I was kind of feeling on his shoes,
Right.
And just the end of the story at that point was that Abdullah decided he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to go to the West anymore. He decided to go back to Syria. He gave up his dream to restart and rebuild his life in the West, and he lives now in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved Syria so much. He's not trying to escape from Syria because he wanted a better life in the
Mm-hmm.
West. He was trying to save his life. He was from a city called Kobani in Syria, and because of ISIS, he had to leave, and he went back again. But at some point in 2015, he decided to escape with his family because he wanted to save their lives. And most of his his family actually died trying to cross, to Greece. So it was a very sad story. But again, I want to highlight that God is working in Abdullah's life. God is working among the refugees, and he has control of everything that happens. So I hope that the read at the end of the story, at the end of the chapter, will have that sense that God is sovereign and He's working in the midst of chaos.
And I know exactly the part of the book you're talking about, because when I read it, I feel like one of the reasons maybe it's memorable for a lot of us is it's one of the only stories in your book where I felt like I had a visual. I could picture exactly what had happened. And it's quite sad and heartbreaking. But as you mentioned, a reminder for us of the reality that these are real people and that these stories have happened, but that God can change stories. And that's part of what this whole book that you've written, Changing Stories, is all about. Together we can change this story with God's help. So speaking of God and your story, you did a lot of work with Arsenal Hill Presbyterian Church, and you've mentioned it, I think, one time already in the live stream. But if those of you who read the book, you'll read a little bit about the work that Arsenal Hill did. So would you, Gyro, like to speak a little bit to your relationship with that church and how that ministry got started?
Yes. Well, we were working in Africa for 12 years, Vanya and I, and then we decided to go to the US to study, to do a master's degree. And we didn't know personally a single person in Columbia, South Carolina. Um, we didn't know a church, so we came there with no recommendations for like churches or pastors. So we went to Columbia to study, and then we met a couple from Brazil, good friends, Lucas and Shaila, and someone invited them to go to Arsenal Hill Presbyterian Church. And they said, we already have a church here, but there's a new couple from Brazil. They're here. Maybe they would be interested. And then they passed on to us the invitation, and we decided to go. Like, we didn't have a car, we didn't have a church, and then they called us and they invited us to go, and we are like, oh, as long as you provide a ride, we'd love to
There's
join
always a
you.
church person who can give you a ride, right?
So, and then we went to this church. We met Pastor Rob. He was kind of like renovating the church. It was only a few members at that point. He had served in Turkey and he wanted to work with refugees. And then, so he invited us to come the following Sunday, and we started building a relationship. And we felt, if there is a church in Columbia that needs help, that's the church. So we started going there, and then and just hearing from them, and just their love for one another and their love for foreigners. They wanted to be a multicultural church, and then they invited us to start this refugee work, this refugee ministry with Syrians and Iraqis, and then later with Congolese people. And we felt that that would be something that we'd love to do. And then that's how we joined them. At some point, we became members of the church, and today we just feel that we have a family in Colombia. I'm so glad that we didn't focus too much on our studies and forget that it needed to be practical. We needed to get involved with people. I'm so glad, and we have a family there, not only with the members of the church, but also with the refugees
Yes.
in Colombia that became a
You
family
must
to
miss
us.
them very much while you're away.
Yes, cannot wait to see them again.
Yes.
They became family to us.
Oh, and the model that you used when you were there at Arsenal Hill, is that the model that you recommend in your book, or does your book recommend a particular model for working with refugees?
I would say the book doesn't talk about a prescriptive model. It's not like a recipe. It's more like a descriptive model. So in the book, I describe the way that we're doing things, as a suggestion for people who want to get engaged with refugees so that they can, just get ideas and know from where to start. Also, I highlight like fruitful practices, practices that we are doing and that we felt they were good practices or fruitful practices. Also, in my research, I compared our practices to a document from the Refugee Highway Partnership. They developed a document on best practices for refugee ministry. So I compared what we were doing with that document, and then I tried to highlight what I think was good, and then I present that as a suggestion for people. But it's not something from another planet. It's very basic things. Like I think that some of the characteristics of the work that we are doing were founded on love, like abundant love, on empathy with our refugee friends. We had a lot of engagement. The people involved are so engaged that at some point, like Arsenal Hill had more refugees that we are serving than church members.
Mm.
So we're so
Wow.
engaged and mobilizing people and engaging the refugees that we are serving more
Right.
people than the number of members that we're getting together on Sundays for worship. So we are very intentional on recruiting as well. We knew that the task was bigger than we could afford, than we could address. So we decided to mobilize people in the city, especially at CAU, Columbia International University. So we had students, we had even some professors coming alongside and joining us in the work there. So it was really a powerful experience working together, with the body of Christ, with people from CIU, USC, and different institutions in
That's
Colombia.
amazing. It's wonderful. And I wanted to talk, since this book is based on the work that you did here in the United States. I know that much of your work has been done in other countries, and hopefully at the end I would like to talk to you a little bit about that. But just knowing that you did this work here in the US, in the US, the refugee crisis has been highly politicized, unfortunately. And in different parts of the world, that's also true. So I don't just want to call out the US for this. I just happen to know the US situation very well because that's where I live. Does your book at all address the political environment as it relates to the refugee crisis?
The short answer is
Ooh,
no. I try to stay away from that for different reasons. One of the reasons is I have been living overseas for many years now, to such a point that I don't feel comfortable talking about politics in Brazil,
right.
where I come from. I feel I'm not updated, on the political debate. And I felt, coming to the US and then trying, or even like writing a book and trying to tell Americans, what they have to do politically regarding such a hard issue as immigration and refugees, I felt that was not what I should do. So, but many times, as I was talking to people about refugees and engaging refugees, people would ask me, so what's your opinion? Like, should we open the
Mhm.
borders? Should we close the borders? And what I would answer was, instead of discussing opening or closing the board, I think our biggest discussion or our biggest focus should be on engaging,
Yes,
welcoming the refugees, the immigrants that are already there.
right.
You know, we had so many refugees, refugee neighbors, immigrants there, that if we would engage the ones that are already there, I think we would do a great work. We would address the crisis. So that's my focus on the
Okay.
book. What God is asking us as Christians, how should we relate to the refugee crisis as
And of course,
Christians?
the Bible does
What is
speak to migration, doesn't it? Do you talk in the book at all about the theological aspect of migration? I'm sorry to cut you off, but
Yes, no problems. Yeah, actually, there is a chapter on that. There is a whole chapter on that where I try to show that from Genesis to Revelation, you know, the Bible is always talking about migration, people on the move, you know, God calling Abraham to move to a new land, and then Moses and Daniel, even Jesus,
Mm.
after he was born, having to go and find refuge in Egypt, and then moving back to his homeland later on. I talk about migration in the Bible in one of the chapters, both in the Old and then in the New Testament, providing biblical basis for Christians who wants to know, you know, what are the bases, what are the biblical basis for us to get involved with the migration
And that,
crisis.
which leads perfectly to the next thing I wanted to ask you. You know, we have people watching us live, and there will be many people who will watch this after it posts. So if there's someone watching today who might be wondering, well, this is great that Gyro and his wife are doing this. It's great that Columbia International University and Arsenal Hill Presbyterian Church were involved in this, but why should I get involved? I don't even know if there are refugees in my area. Why should I get involved? So how might you?
Mhm. Mhm. I would say first, because God desires his people to be gentle and loving for the aliens, for the foreigner, for the pilgrims, you know, living among them or passing by. There are many verses in the Bible, as I mentioned before. So, like Leviticus chapter 19, verse 34, God is telling us that we have to love them as ourselves. So God is actually not only desiring but demanding from His people that we shall love the foreigners, the immigrants, which includes the refugees living among us. But also, I would say it's a huge opportunity for us to serve and to change stories in our days. You know, the refugee crisis is shaping our world. It's the biggest, the largest humanitarian crisis of our days. So refugees are everywhere. We cannot avoid getting in touch with refugees. And so it's a huge opportunity for us to serve, to glorify God in our generation. And I would say also, like maybe a third reason is it's an opportunity for us to grow.
Mhm.
So don't think that engaging refugees, we are only helping them, we are only teaching them, you know, we are only giving. We will receive a
Mm.
lot. I would say much more than we can expect. As I said, I was a foreigner living in the US. I built relationships with refugees. They became our family there, or part of our family there. I remember in one of Vanya's, my wife's birthday, that they came to our home. They said, you know, we don't have family here. You don't have family
Mm.
here. Let's be family to each other. And we're then able to celebrate her birthday with our refugee friends in one of the occasions. And then they would invite us as well for, you know, birthdays and special occasions to their homes. And it was, you know, so we just feel we received so
Mhm.
much. We are so
Mhm.
blessed by them. So these are some of the reasons I would say why we should get engaged with the refugee crisis and considering serving God among
Yeah, I
refugees.
absolutely agree with you. And I think that God has also, I don't know if gifted you is the right term that I'm looking for, but you know, until you have lived cross-culturally or lived far from your family and friends, you often don't understand how difficult it is to be a stranger in a strange land. And having that experience yourself, not just of having lived in South Africa, being away from Brazil, being here in the US, but having been away for a long period of time. You know, when one is a refugee, often there's even the added burden of knowing I may never see my family again. I may never go home again. And that's something that you and your wife might have a little bit more empathy and insight into just because of your own personal experience. And that, of course, would deepen the relationship because there would be an understanding. But I want to say to everyone watching, you don't need to have those experiences to understand or to even empathize with or sympathize with those who are far from family and friends. You can think to yourself, how would I feel if I were in this city alone and I knew no one and we had no one to celebrate a
Yes.
birthday with? And that's a good way to start thinking about how I can be involved. Sometimes it is something as simple as celebrating a birthday. You know, it's not
Yes.
necessarily something you need to be trained for or equipped for. Some of the most basic things, being beside someone, sharing with them when they're lonely, and things like that can go a long way towards showing the love of Christ. So, you mentioned, you know, the
Yes.
Syrian refugee crisis is the biggest humanitarian crisis of our generation, at least up to this point, I would say. How big is the scale of the migration crisis right now?
Yeah, we live in a world where we have nearly 8 million people living
Mm,
displaced. Not most of them are refugees, so we have nearly 80 million, and 26 million are
mm,
refugees. So we have a lot of people who are displaced within their own country. They're called internally
mhm,
displaced. These are people who have been forced out of their homes. Um, some of them are still in danger, but they're still living. They're still living there in their countries. Sometimes under a government that has produced the war that they had to face, like in Sudan, for example, in Syria. So it's a big crisis. 1% of the human population is living in this kind of
wow,
situation, living as
wow.
displaced people. So it's a huge problem. As I mentioned before, it's the largest humanitarian
And
crisis
how, you
of
know,
our
it's
days.
hard to summarize such a big question in this short video, but how is that affecting them? You know, how does forced displacement affect people, you know, just on a basic level?
Hmm. Yeah, and then it goes back to
Mm,
Abdullah and his family. So they're having to move from their land, being forced out of their homes. Some people have been killed. Some people have died trying to escape, as Alan Kurdi. Especially women. Women have been
mhm,
abused and
mhm,
raped. Some of them have become slaves of ISIS, sexual slaves. So it's affecting a lot of in a lot of ways. And just working with refugees here in the Middle East, I have met a lot of refugees here that are here for 9 years, 10 years, 11 years, still expecting to be
mm,
resettled, and then they cannot go back.
mhm,
As so the UN proposes three solutions to the refugee crisis. One would be, or to people who are living as refugees, one would be repatriation, so they would go back to their home countries, which is not a possibility for most of the refugees here, to be integrated in the society that they're living now, which is not also a possibility here. And then the third solution is resettlement,
mm,
and only 1% of the refugees have been
mm.
resettled. So it seems that none of the long-term solutions proposed by UN is working for a lot of refugees. So, and then it's hard for them to have hope and to have a future. So it's affecting them in many ways, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's a crisis. It's a
Yeah,
chaos. It's
thank you for
chaos.
sharing that. And it gives us an insight into what you're doing in working with refugees. And it also gives an insight in how we can pray for them, you know, as we think about the scale of the crisis. It can feel very overwhelming. And so it's good for us to remind ourselves we do serve a God who is above and beyond our ability to do. You know, we do our little thing that we can, and then we pray to our powerful God and ask Him. So you've given us some very good thoughts on how we can pray for our neighbors who are refugees, who are forced into being displaced from their country. In the little bit of time that we have left, Gyro, I want to do just a small pivot in our conversation. This is your first book in English, as I understand, and I want to congratulate you on that achievement. Up until this point, your other 13 books are in Portuguese. Is that correct? Or Portuguese and Spanish?
Most of them, yeah, they're two Portuguese. Yes, most of them. There are two books that I'm the co-author of those books. So I wrote a chapter for
Okay.
each of the book. But yeah, but this is my first full book, whole book in English.
So what was different about writing in English when it comes to your process? I'm sure it felt very different.
Yes, like expressing myself in a deep way. It's a challenge. When I actually started writing in English was by invitation from a friend called John Becker. Uh, so he invited me to write a chapter for a book, and I was like, I don't know if I can do it. I could do it in Portuguese, and then he challenged me by saying, you know, why don't you write in Portuguese? Then you can express yourself as you want, like in a deep level, and then you translate your chapter into English. And that sounded good to me, but my focus has been like Portuguese because I wanted to bless the church in Brazil. But then I was talking to another friend, Audrey Frank, who's also a author, and she was like, you know, but if you what you write in English will probably arrive, you know, in Brazil as well into your Portuguese readers. So you can do in English, and then you can bless English speakers, and then as a consequence, Portuguese speakers once your books get translated. And it sounded very good to me, and then I felt more encouraged to do it. So it has been a challenging experience, but a huge opportunity to grow as well.
And also an opportunity for us to become friends, because that's actually how we got to know each other. We met at a writers' conference. I think it was 2 years ago here in the United States.
Was in 2018.
It was 2 years ago. I was headed to a writers' conference, and a mutual acquaintance of ours, Ed Smither, messaged me and said, oh, I know someone who's going to be there as well. You two should get connected. And that was a blessing, because from the minute we met, I felt like this is my brother in Christ. And I was glad we were able to connect at that time. And then to be able to take a look at this manuscript in English and see how can we really just take this to the next level. So that's been a blessing as well. Is there anything that, oh, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to mention to people who are watching us that Ruth is also a writer, and she's a writing coach. So if you're planning to write and publish a book in English, so get her contact because she can help you in the process.
Absolutely. I actually enjoy working with multilingual authors. I have a background with teaching English as a foreign language and working with non-native speaker authors, and it's one of my favorite things to do. So don't be afraid to reach out to Gyro and get my contact information from him if you're looking to publish in English. So right as before we wrap up here, Gyro, I do have one more question for you. We've been talking this whole time about the refugee crisis and resettlement and forced migration. Let's think for just a second about who officially is a refugee.
Mm-hmm. A refugee is not a migrant. It's not a person who is thinking about having a better life, making money, living in a different country, providing a better education opportunity for his family. A refugee is someone who is running away from his home, who has been forced out of his land and is trying to survive. Um, of course, in the process, they make choices. They try to make the best choices that they can. But these are not people that are leaving their home because, you know, they're looking for a better life or looking for better opportunities. Mm-hmm. They're leaving their homes because they have been forced to do that. Mm. And as I talk to them, most of them wish that they could go back, or they wish that what they have experienced in life had never happened. Right. So they're coming to us because they are in great need, because they are in great suffering. because they have lost family members in the process. They have been forced out of their place. So that's a refugee.
And I think it's important to make that distinction because of the politicalization that has happened, especially in the United States. I can speak to that because that's my home. A lot of times people who haven't met any refugees develop this mindset of, well, at least they got to come here, or maybe, you know, there's this idea that somehow this is working out for the best or for the benefit of the refugee, when in reality they never wanted to leave their home in the first place. This is something that's been forced on them, and many of them long to be at home and to be among their family members and friends back home. So I think that that's an important distinction to make. Again, something that this book speaks to. Could you tell us how we can get our hands on a copy of this book? I'm fortunate enough to have an early copy. I'm so blessed by that. But can you tell everyone watching how they can get their own copies of Changing Stories?
Yes, I would like to suggest two ways. So the first one, you can go to Wipf and Stock website, to their website. They're the publishers, my publisher, and then if you just search for Changing Stories, you'll be able to get a copy of the book. But another way would be, or second way would be going to Amazon website, and just looking for Changing Stories there. You will be able to get a paperback copy right now, and then in a few days you'll be able to get a Kindle copy as well, if that's what you're looking for.
And maybe after
So,
the live stream is over, if you wouldn't mind putting those links right in the comment section so that people can find them easily, that might be of a
sure.
benefit to them. Just 1 second, I did see that someone put a very good question down here in the comments, so I wanted to pull that up and ask you to address that really quickly. What problems have you met while trying to work with refugees? Is there any particular problem you would like to address?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge is dealing with suffering. You know, just hearing their stories and all that they have faced. I'm not sure if I was ready, if you know I had enough preparation to face that. That has been the biggest challenge and probably the biggest problem that they face. Just how to deal, how to process so much pain and suffering. Here in this context in the Middle East, especially African refugees, they have been complaining a lot about they have been discriminated. That's how they say. Even they say they're no longer like Sudanese and Somalis. They're not top priority for UN anymore. So they complain a lot about that, about not getting enough attention and enough support. They basically live out of international help, and they're not getting enough. So they complain. I would say probably that's their biggest problem. But for me, working with them, I think just dealing with their suffering, with the stories and their pain, yeah, it's a big challenge.
Absolutely. I can see that people are starting to put more questions down in the comments, and we are running out of time here. So I would say perhaps you can address those after our live stream has ended. But for those of you who do have questions about the refugee crisis, this book is a wonderful resource. Some of the things you're asking, because I've read the book, I know some of the things you're asking are addressed in the book. And so I would recommend that you get a copy when you're able, give it a read, recommend it, give it to your pastors, give it to your church leaders, share it with your neighbors, and absolutely pay attention to the stories that are being told in it. You know, it's called Changing Stories, and it's filled with stories. And our God that we worship, you know, entered our story. He came directly to earth and lived embodied among us. And while he was here, he suffered and died. And one way that we show his love to others is doing what he did, which was entering their stories and suffering alongside them and helping to bear that burden. And so I would encourage you, grab a copy of the book, give it a read. And if you have any further questions after that, of course, I know Gyro can help address those as well. I know that you are going to want to thank people for joining us today, but I want to say on my part, I do want to thank everyone for joining us live and those who watch the live stream afterwards. We have enjoyed spending time with you today. And Gyro.
Yeah, I want to thank God for allowing me to write this book and uh, to work with refugees, serve them, welcome them in different places, and then be able to express that in the book. It's really a blessing, and I thank God for that. Just thank my family, my wife, and my Vanya, and my two boys, Mateus and David, partners in what I do, and also thank my publisher, Wipf and Stock. They have invested in my life so much, and I'm so thankful to them. I'd like to thank my literary agent, Jim Hart, who has working alongside as well, and then all the people who have who are directly involved in the process of writing and publishing the book. So thanks to you, Ruth, and I think just representing everybody else. So thank you so much for all of you who have invested in my life. And thank you guys, the ones who are watching, the ones who
Yeah,
watch
I
later on. Thank you
one
so
more
much.
note
It's a
for
pleasure.
everyone watching. I'm sorry, as an author, I can't let this moment pass. If you buy Gyro's book, which I know you will, after you read it, do him a favor by going online and leaving an honest review, either on Amazon or on Goodreads, wherever it is that you can leave a consumer review about books. Believe it or not, that helps authors so much. It helps us to show that people are reading our books, and it helps other readers, it helps the book find its audience among its readers. So after you get your copy, after you read it, I'm going to go on later today and add my review because I've read the book. So that is something you can do that would be a big help and a support to Gyro, and also help the book find its audience even more. In addition to recommending it to family and friends and people who you think might benefit from the message. So.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Ruth. What a blessing to be with
It's good
you
to
and
talk
just
to
talk about
you.
the
And
book today.
congratulations again on this accomplishment and having this book come out into the world. I know it's going to be a blessing because it's so practical, and it's full of compassion. And I know that those who read it are going to see how simple and achievable it is to help welcome the stranger as they're here among us. So thank you for spending part of your release day with us, Gyro. And I hope that that your day continues to be a blessing. And thank you for sharing
Thank
wisdom and
you.
expertise with us today.
Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Ruth.
God bless. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.